Hello,
Hello, welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour. I am Brandon Tessers,
I'm Olivia Candosia.
and I'm a licensed therapist, but this is not therapy for very, very many reasons. And Olivia is an intern therapist who this is still not therapy for very, very many reasons. This is just an open conversation. The two of us are here talking with one another and with all of you. Absent any other information, we're doing our best to guess who you are, what you're interested in, what you're hearing, how we're impacting you. For those of you who are willing and able to participate by putting things in the chat, we very much appreciate that because it gives us more information to base those guesses on. I always say this, and every time I'm like, I want to clarify that this is not different from any other conversation where people are always making their best guesses about what the other person wants and is hearing. It's just the amount of information that you have to be able to draw on to make those guesses. We work with a private therapy practice called Effective Artistry. Our office is located in Northbrook, Illinois. We do individual, couples, family, and group therapy with individuals in the state of Illinois and Wisconsin. We also work with your executive functioning coaches who can work with people all over the world via the internet. We will do our best to read out all the chat comments out loud because we stream on 3 different platforms simultaneously, and you'll only see the comments from the people on the platform that you are on. So we try to read them out so that everybody knows what's going on. And we're just going to talk about whatever, and you jump in at any point, just like any conversation. Don't worry about whether you're interrupting or whether you're on topic or any of that nonsense. With all my in-person clients and staff and meetings generally, I do a lot of work to teach people to interrupt and to derail if that's what they're thinking or whatever. Really, the work is about stop thinking about it as derailing and to just prioritize what it is that's coming to your mind. But yeah, jump in with anything at any point. Is that it? Roughly?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I feel like I just got popped into a new environment. I was on vacation for a few days, and then I was just in another room, and then I just popped in here at time, and there's a different sound, a different person I haven't seen in a bit. I'm just like, whoa.
Yeah, usually we're talking
Yeah.
before the stream for some amount of time, sometimes a couple hours. But today has been a more hectic day, so we're just jumping straight into it.
Yeah, I'm just adjusting.
Well, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, it was nice to be away and have a vacation that didn't have any real set agenda and just going with the flow. And I don't know, it was very nice for my partner and I. We just had so much fun and really didn't listen to a lot of music because we were just talking so much. And
where'd you go?
We went to Kentucky. Yeah, we just went to Kentucky. Amy, one of our therapists here, gave me a bunch of recommendations of things to do there. But all of those things were fully booked out or too expensive. So we found other things to do.
You said something about not listening to a ton of music. Was this for some kind of music festival?
No. I just meant in the car, driving.
Oh.
Yeah, we didn't really have a lot of songs playing. We were just...
I love long drive conversations.
Yeah. You love long drive conversations.
Top tier kind of a conversation.
Yes. They go to so many places. They're silly. They're just there was so much complexity, and then just not thinking and just kind of whatever, really goofy stuff. It was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. Sorry, I have a hair on my eyelashes.
It's okay.
Whatever.
And then my favorite thing, Brennan, is there was not much going on in Kentucky, but we got tickets to the Monster Jam Monster Truck show, which both of us have never done. We're not into cars at all, and now we're hooked. It was so much fun.
Hooked as in what you're going.
We're gonna go again. We're gonna go again when it's in Chicago. We were looking at people's podcasts and reading all the bios of the performers. My entire Google search history is how much do they get paid? How do you unload? Just so many questions.
Performers as in what? Monster truck drivers?
Yeah.
Call them performers?
I don't know. That's what I call them.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
My impression, I've been to one of these shows when I was young. That I barely remember anything.
Yeah.
Might have been 8 or 9 or something like that. But my impression is that it's more about the truck than the driver. The trucks are characters and have personalities.
Yes, and we did brainstorm what our trucks would be like and what flares we would have. But we were also interested in being how old are these people? When did they get started in this? let's look at their Instagram accounts and
I did that after I went to Medieval Times
Yeah.
the first time. I was like, how does one become one of these
a
like
squire.
performers? That's fun. Cool.
Yeah. So
So now you're a monster truck person.
now I'm a monster truck person. I almost got a shirt.
Yeah. Almost.
Almost. I almost got a
Doesn't
shirt.
really count. Not quite a monster.
I got to babysit my way up.
Well, I'm glad you had a good trip.
Thanks.
I didn't actually even know that it was like a trip. I knew that you were out of the office,
Right.
but I didn't know the information about what you were doing.
Yeah, I didn't have any to give you, so I didn't know.
It is not required, even if you did.
Yep.
It doesn't really matter. It's interesting to know about, but like
Mhm.
not a thing that needs to be reported. Well, good. Glad you had a good time.
Thanks. What's up with you? So much.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a lot, but this is particularly busy time. As we've mentioned, we're in the process of growing, and so we're doing hiring stuff and logistical, administrative, annoying stuff, and developing people into different roles, and just a lot going on. But all good things. Nothing.
Mhm.
I would love to be a person where I never get stressed about stuff unless it's like what I call a negative delta problem, where like if it doesn't get addressed, things are going to be worse than they currently are. Because for the most part, none of my problems are those kinds of problems at this moment.
Mhm, mhm.
Like they're all things where if it's done, things will be better, and if it's not done, things won't be any better than they currently are, but they won't be any worse than they currently
Sure.
are. But I still stress about that stuff from time to time, but not as much as I used to. So that's nice.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, I'm good.
Good.
Chilling.
Chilling. I'm sad when I got back. It's cold. It
Yeah.
got cold out, and it was like so upper 70s the entire time I was gone, and so then getting back.
Oh,
to
it
this-
was. It actually got hot a couple
Yeah.
days last week, and then all of a sudden on Saturday dropped. Just in time for the weekend to be going to Rex's soccer game and doing all this stuff is when Augie's baseball practice.
Mhm.
That's when it gets all cold.
Of course.
I think that just made it sound like I have like a lot of sports activities with my children and that we're a very sports focused family, but we're not. But those are two events that I did have outdoors this weekend.
Are there other extracurriculars that they do?
Some. So Miles does. Actually, this is an interesting conversation because what counts as like extracurriculars
Sure, yeah.
is a very interesting, as a general thing, and I'm talking about like this specific culture of this like Northbrook area where I live, but also just generally kind of upper middle class to upper class stuff. I think it's generally middle class, but especially in these cultures, there's these ideas about like kids have to be booked up with all this, and you got to be taking at least one sport and at least one instrument and at least one and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, simple answer is he takes piano lessons, he takes tennis lessons, and he plays cello in the school orchestra. That's the like scheduled activities that he has outside of school. And then Augie is doing baseball for the first time right now, and he just turned 6. That's the first like regimented thing we've done with him. But we're looking at like he's interested in cooking classes.
Okay.
So again, personally, I don't think everything needs to be a class,
Uh-huh.
right? Like 20 years from now, would you rather look back on like, oh, I spent that time in that cooking class learning that stuff, or like I spent time with my grandma learning how to cook some of her stuff, or whatever.
Mhm.
Like I'd rather set things up in that way. And then Rex also, he is baking class. That's a comment from my dad. Hi, Dad, baking class. Rex, who is 3, this is his first regimented thing too, is soccer, and it was just his last game of it. It is. It was cute. Yeah, no. Honestly, most of what keeps us busy on the weekends is just lots of like, there's always at least 1 to 2 birthday parties that one or the other of the boys has to get to. And just lots of stuff like that. Oh, yeah.
Tell me more about extracurricular and what that means, or what that.
Well, I mean, specifically the word extracurricular is referring to like stuff that you do at a school.
extra.
I guess that's true. Yeah.
The prefix extra means like on top of or outside of, the bounds of, in addition to, and the curricular referring to the curriculum. So it's stuff that you do that's beyond, like that's not what's in the curriculum, extra stuff on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
So would be referring to school, where curriculum is the thing that matters, but obviously is now used to mean all kinds of things that we previously might have called hobbies or whatever. But it does get used in a way that carries a connotation of like official structure, like you're taking lessons in a regimented
versus
way,
like a
you're
hobby
paying a professional, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, generally people wouldn't say like, oh, I play Warhammer at the game shop on the weekends, and call that an extracurricular. Or like, oh, my kid's really into playing Call of Duty, we wouldn't call that an extracurricular.
Yeah.
I mean, it has a lot to do with school and how we think about school and all this stuff culturally. Just that like school is the only thing that matters for children, and people don't actually believe that, right? If you ask them,
you need to live in extra grandpa.
It would help. If you actually ask people, like they'll say, of course, like something I've been saying for a long time. If you ask any parent, like what matters to you most about your child, like if you could pick one thing for them to go the way you want it to go and nothing else that you would be able to control, people are generally going to be like, I just want them to be happy, which is absolutely true. It's also very like vague and non-specific. There's not a way to be able to identify like, well, if you just do X, you'll be happy. So in our culture, we have intelligence as a stand-in for happiness, meaning like if they're really smart and successful in school, more generally success is the stand-in for happiness, which also makes sense because success just means like accomplishing the things you mean to accomplish, intend to accomplish. Of course, we then have other meanings of that word that get conflated in, like making a lot of money. Although again, nobody's going to be saying that, happiness is uncorrelated to the amount of money that you have. So that makes sense. And then we correlate success with intelligence, and then we correlate intelligence with school performance. So if everyone's going to say, I care about my kids being happy, and that's actually what everybody means. But if you monitor what people do, we're prioritizing their academics. So that's not just school, it's any learning which is academic in nature, meaning it's not directly relevant to their life, it's in preparation for some future relevance.
Even like a dance recital?
Yeah, what about that?
I guess I was thinking like how, I don't know.
That's academic, yes.
Yeah, okay. I was thinking core classes versus like other things that help build skills.
Well, the idea of building skills is, we're talking about academic.
Okay, great.
Like the point of this thing that we are doing is not in and of itself, it is for how it impacts your ability to do other things later that matter more. If we're engaging in some, and this is not to say that we shouldn't do this by any means, like this is.
All I'm thinking is that's everything though.
Right, but it's not.
It's not.
But it's got such a level of importance for us that we think of everything else as being nothing. So like when a client comes in and I say, what'd you do this last weekend or whatever, and they're like, nothing. That's not literally true, right? If you are existing, you're doing something. It could be sitting there staring at the wall. That's not what it is, but like that could be what you're doing. But saying nothing, what we mean is like nothing of importance, nothing relevant, whatever. And yes, then we put it all back to like the things that count as something is stuff that like helps us to theoretically have a better life in the future.
Sure.
But no, that's not everything. In fact, that's not even the majority of stuff that people like. Using the bathroom is not a skill development thing, and that's silly, I know, but like, taking a nice shower or eating a nice meal or playing with your friends or watching some videos or TV, like none of that is skill development stuff. But yes, we just think like, no.
But it kind of is.
Like, you can, anything that a person does, you can say like, whenever we do anything, doing that same thing becomes easier to do again in the future. But the intent,
for sure,
is not to
the
develop
intent.
skill. the intent is to whatever it is for each specific thing.
Yeah.
But yes, you can always say that we develop skill at anything, right?
Right.
I've become very skillful at navigating Netflix's, user interface or whatever.
Sure. Congratulations.
We don't watch a lot of Netflix anymore, but not that we don't watch TV, we just don't watch a lot of Netflix anymore. It used to be the go-to, and now it's.
What's your go-to now?
I don't know that we really have one. We do. So there's a term in like online autistic circles called same food,
Okay.
which is like for some people, especially autistic people or people who don't identify as autistic but think of themselves as like picky eaters or ARFID. There's like a small number of foods. ARFID. What does it stand for? Something restrictive food intake disorder.
Okay.
But essentially is like picky eating to the point that
Okay.
we're going to call it a disorder now.
Got it.
So same foods are like, my buttered noodles. Like I can always have buttered noodles. That'll always work. Not to say that I can never eat anything else besides that stuff. I can, but trying new and different things can be like, I need more energy, resources to be able and willing to do that. If I don't have anything in me, I'm just going to do one of my same foods, So in my house, my wife and I, we use the term same show in the same way that there's like a certain number of shows there's plenty of shows and movies that we want to watch that we're interested in and whatever that we would likely really enjoy, but it just takes effort and energy to start it and to like participate in, where there are some shows that like you can just put on and you don't, like when you have no energy, it's still like nice to have it on and you don't have to pay that close of attention, but there's enough there so that you're not just bored or whatever. So we cycle through these same shows, and it's her. She's the same show person. She, even before streaming, she had like the box sets of all the Friends DVDs, and she would always watch like 1 or 2 episodes of Friends on her little, TV in the corner that she had since college before going to bed. Helps her to sleep. So she's in charge of picking our same shows, and we rotate through those things. The Office, Parks and Rec, New Girl, Friends, generally these like ensemble shows where everybody is likable more or less, sitcom kind of like plots are mostly resolved within 20 some minutes. And we particularly like the newer version of these where there's like overarching plot lines as opposed to some of the older where like really nothing ever changes. But no individual episode is like the deal-breaking, like game-changing episode or whatever,
I'm thinking about how I'm always like, I don't want to repeat myself or like, but we always talk about this and how that is also reflective in the media I consume of like, I don't ever want to rewatch something because I've already seen it. But even if I don't remember it, I don't want to watch it again unless I was like in love with it. But there are very few where I've had that experience, and I'm just kind of laughing at that. Like, I don't know.
We have a tendency in our culture, as we talk about all the time, we intellectualize things. We prioritize cognition, and in order to be able to intellectualize something, you have to simplify it, right? Like you can't have a thought about all the various elements of this thing and permutations and impacts and whatever. We have to be able to categorize it in relatively narrow ways. And so that leads us to then over focus on some elements of a thing. For example, well, we'll talk about the reason I'm saying this right now with the watching shows. One thing that happens a lot in our culture is people focus on plot when they're talking about like watching or reading things, like knowing what happens. And of course, the experience of watching a show is impacted by, whatever you're interested in the plot and how that plot is revealed to you and whatever. But even if you watch something that you already know all the plot, you still have an experience watching the show. So plot tends to be, it's kind of like, what's a good example of something else where we like over focus on a particular, like learning at school, right? Does learning happen in school? Absolutely, 100%. Of course, learning would happen no matter what a person's doing, as you pointed out. And of course, at school, like there's also socializing and there's also like a bunch of stuff going on, but we identify the academic instruction as like the main thing, the point. right? So same thing with plot.
What's the point?
There are movies and shows that you've enjoyed that really don't have much going on plot wise. You know, like sometimes we refer to some movies that we refer to as like character studies. The point of those is like there's really not much of interest in the plot, in the content of what happens or whatever. It's just the experience of watching these people interact or whatever. So that's okay to be focused on plot and not want to rewatch something that you've forgotten.
It also blows my mind. I was gonna say not literally, but like duh. It blows my mind that my mom, when we're watching movies at her house, she will like Google search the plot line just to know what happens next, and it makes me so mad because I'm like, Mom, just follow up. She's like, No, I need to know, but I don't know.
I mean, plot twists are almost like required for movies these days. It's like an expectation that the plot will surprise you, and that was not always the case. You know, like the further back in time you go, the more it becomes that like a plot twist is what that movie ended up becoming known for. Right. You know, like the movie Psycho is an example where
20 minutes in. Oops.
Well, that is a big shift 20 minutes in, but no, I'm talking about the like, have you seen the movie? There's a big plot twist reveal, spoiler alert, for like a 70-year-old movie or whatever.
Am I just clueless right now?
Well, you're led to believe throughout the course of the movie that that Norman Bates' mother is the killer. And then the big plot twist reveal at the very end of the movie is that she is dead. And
the skeleton's in there.
For some period of time.
Yeah.
And that he like puts on her clothes when he kills people. And so he is like in the persona of her, but it's him doing it, right?
Yeah. I guess when I first watched that, I wasn't thinking plot twist. I was just like, weird. I don't know.
It's a huge plot twist. Yeah. Or another one that like for most of people our age and whatever that we don't even think of as a plot twist, but it's still enshrined in our pop culture, is Darth Vader being Luke Skywalker's father. That like we still all say, like if you say Luke, I am your father, everybody knows what that is a reference to, even though I knew about that moment before I ever saw a Star Wars movie. Yeah. Which, you know, just to show off my nerd skills, because I know that there are going to be people out there that are like, you know, with our millions of viewers, that are going to be like, no, the line is not Luke, I am your father. The line is actually, no, I am your father.
I am so glad you said that, because I have tried to Google search that so many times to find it. I'm like, it doesn't say it. He's not saying that.
It's because it's a response to Luke saying to Vader, you killed my father. He says, no, I am your father. So the emphasis is on the am, not on the father. How everybody said, Luke, I am your father. Everyone emphasizes that.
Why did I do that?
Because people don't remember what it's a response to. They just remember the reveal, right? Like the point of that, the reason it gets stuck in everyone's mind is like, oh crap, Vader is his dad. Not like the moment that elicited that response.
Yeah.
Over focus on plot. I mean, even as recent as like
Brendan, I am your father.
I mean, I had to say it right. Yes. M. Night Shyamalan's like whole career is all about plot twists. And this causes a problem for people because we've talked about this with like Game of Thrones, where if you make your name on giving people something different than what they expect, sooner or later people expect you to give something different than what they expect, and now you're in trouble because like nothing you can do can shock people anymore because everybody's watching out for like what would be the shocking twist. But plot stuff is great. I mean, a lot of the books that I read, I love, especially on first read-throughs, I will like zoom through books because I want to know what happens next.
Do you have a like a digital book kind of thing, like a Kindle?
Yeah, I use Kindle. I love the Kindle. I recommend it to people.
Okay, because I'm wanting to invest in something of the like, and I'm trying to figure out what I want.
For me, and this, you know, your mileage may vary kind of stuff. We could talk about some specifics about why it might vary from one person to another. But a Kindle is like the best sleep aid investment that I could recommend to people. Like it's going to help you sleep, again, within certain parameters, whatever, but it's going to help your sleep better than eye mask or sound machine or like all the other various stuff that people generally tend to focus on. So yeah, I think the Kindle is great.
I used to say I was too smart to wear an eye mask because I knew on the other side there was light. And my boyfriend was like, "What are you talking about?"
That is hilarious and like very apropos of the conversation we're having. That like the focus on cognition and knowledge and intellect, as though like the experience of having light in your eyes is irrelevant.
Right.
It's just about whether there's light there or not.
Right.
Which is
So
silly.
goofy.
I have a hard time even knowing like what were you thinking when you were saying that in earnest?
I still kind of hold by it a little bit, Brandon.
What, is your contention here that an eye mask is irrelevant because having the light on your eyes doesn't change anything as long as you know there's light?
Yeah. Yes.
You genuinely believe that?
No, not anymore. But for a while, I was like, it's just, I don't know. Maybe it was like a textural thing too, where I'm like,
Yeah, I don't
there's a
like.
thing.
I should say I haven't tried them, but the idea of having something on my face like that seems very uncomfortable
Yes.
to me. Also, just the way I sleep and move and stuff. In my mind, it always seems like you'd have to like, sleep there and not move your head at all at night. Otherwise, it's just gonna like fall off and get twisted up.
I have a CPAP machine that I've only used a couple of times. And I have a lot of clients who also have CPAP machines. And they always not they always, but often it is talked about how complicated and frustrating it is to do the whole routine of like filling it up with the water and putting it on your head and then taking it off to go to the bathroom. And I sometimes don't know what to say other than like, yeah, I don't even wear mine because I hate that. And I wonder if there's like some way to make that an easier process or like, I don't know.
We can talk about CPAP machines specifically. It is
Yeah.
fairly common. There's a lot of overlap. I have some personal theories about some things, but there are like observed correlations and overlaps between sleep apnea and ADHD in specific, but neurodivergence generally. So yeah, lots of people use them. What are you asking? How do you make it easier?
Yeah, because it's such a pain in the butt. Like, eventually I will get used to having whatever on my face and not sleeping with my jaw open. But knowing that I can't do that makes me want to more and more. So that's one thing. But two, it's the like having to regularly clean it and fill it up with new water so it's fresh. And every day, like, how do I build that into a routine?
Well, the way to build anything into a routine is to just do it over and over and over. And there are some modifications about, like making it become routine more quickly, but it's still going to be, you just have to do it over and over and over.
I hate that.
So this comes back to cost and value.
Yeah.
That my first recommendation to people, whether they already have one or looking into one or whatever, would be start tracking some stuff. So as with anything, like when people are interested in exploring medication or getting a new app they want to use or a new system they're going to try or whatever, we always want to identify first, what is the thing that is happening that you are hoping that with the assistance of this new thing will be happening differently than it is?
Brandon, on that note, just to go off for a second, I don't wear my machine, and so I snore very loudly. But because of that, my boyfriend always has earbuds, extra ones, and we had those for the Monster Truck show. So you're welcome. Anyways.
You're welcome.
So you're welcome that I snore.
What is it that you're hoping will change if you use this thing and if it works the way that you're hoping that it will? And with CPAP machines, generally, people are going to talk about like, well, I want to get better quality sleep, right?
Yeah.
Which is great. And that's like somebody saying like, I want to be happier. Like, yes, great. But also that's not observable yet.
Yeah, I was like, how do you monitor that?
So the next question then is like, same. We just keep going back until we get to something observable. Great. Okay. So what is it that you're hoping, if I slept better, if I got better sleep, what would be different?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would feel less tired throughout the day. Oh, okay. and you'd feel more what instead?
Mhm.
Because remember, we always want to like focus them in that direction. I want to feel more energized. And if you were more energized, what would change? I would work on my art more, or I would play with my kids more, or whatever. So now we're finally arrived at like, here's a thing that you can track. You can track levels of like how tired or energetic I feel independent of what thing is happening. And I often do, that's where we do that energy management stuff, get people to start tracking what their energy experience is like.
How do we do that?
I'll do the quick version.
Okay.
I think we've done it before, but maybe
I don't
not.
remember.
If not, slow me down and interrupt me.
Okay.
But, we come up with a scale. My default one I use generally is like 1 to 100, where 100 is like the most energized you've ever felt, and 1 is like 0 is death. So 1 is
Yes.
as low as you can get before dying. And at first, you just create the scale and you just say, now, as often as you can, as often as you think about it, just whenever it occurs to you, check in with where am I at? I'm at like a 60 right now. I'm like at 80 right now. In the same way that if you start checking the temperature every day before you go outside, over time you'll start to be able to develop a sense of like, you'll be outside and be like, it feels like it's like 62 and it's pretty close. But if you don't check the temperature and track like what that feels like, at first you're just going to be like, it feels cold. Or if you had to guess what temperature, it's not likely.
I'm getting tripped up in my mind right now because I'm thinking about when we were driving on the road this weekend, and there was just a point where I kind of just like became really tired, but only physically, or I don't know actually anymore. I guess I don't have a good measurement tool. There was something.
You started to fall asleep. You started to get sleepy.
Yes.
Yeah. Were you driving?
No.
Okay. So this is taking us in a different direction, but that's also a fun direction to talk about, because that's later on, right? Like we start. Generally, I don't know that I've said that on the stream before, but I don't actually want to spend a lot of time and energy on energy management stuff with people, because it is still an interim step, right? The point eventually is I want to do X things that I'm not doing, or not do Y things that I'm doing, whatever. So that's the thing we really want to be monitoring more than anything else. But energy management is a very good interim step for people, because the kinds of people we're working with, including myself and including, people here at the stream, we tend to be like intellectually focused. I want to be able to like track something, learn something new, and correlate, how I feel to what I then do. And so it's a step to get that going. But we do that very brief thing first, and then depending on how it's going, we move. There's all different kinds of ways to go. But yes, getting more complex into separating it into different kinds of energy is one thing that I'll do with people.
Craziest thing, Brandon, is so tired, stop at a gas station, stand up for like 5 seconds, and then not tired anymore just because I moved.
Yeah. When you say tired, we've established already that part of what you mean by that is like falling asleep, as in it's difficult to keep your eyes open.
Difficult to keep your eyes open, not
like your body's doing this where it wants to sleep, and you're like, no, don't sleep.
Yes. Well, it's not telling me don't sleep, but it's just not sleeping.
Well, why not fall asleep? Why not just fall asleep if you're not driving?
I don't know. I was trying to, but I wasn't.
Okay. So right there, that's a different thing, right?
I don't know.
Meaning like, the experience I'm talking about, it happens with people in class a lot, where you're like, you're trying so hard to stay awake. In those moments, if you just let yourself sleep, it's wonderful, right? Like if you are able to just be like, never mind, you go right to sleep. There's not like now I should try to fall asleep. So that's not what you were experiencing, is what you're telling me.
Correct.
So what do you mean you had an intellectual idea that this would be a good time for me to sleep? Like I want to take a nap right now, not an impulse, but a thought of, I want to take a nap now.
I don't know, Brandon. It was just like exhaustion. I could sleep, but
it was exhaustion, because that's the word that you use, the label that you use to represent the feeling. Now try and use different words.
It was
to explain what your experience was in that moment.
Pain in my body too, from like walking so much.
Pain generally works against falling asleep.
So that was that there was like a contrast there of like wanting to sleep but being in physical pain.
Okay. So you were in pain, but what do you mean by exhausted? I don't think the pain
I
is
don't
what you're
know.
referring to as exhaustion, or was it part of that?
Maybe, I don't know.
This was the drive home.
Yes.
All right, I'll make a bunch of guesses.
Can you please?
Yeah, just to move us along.
Thanks, man.
Most likely it sounds like this was just an intellectual thing where you were like, the trip was over, you're getting ready to
Oh
transition.
my God, you're
back
right.
in.
It was starting to think about different things. I started thinking about, okay, what am I going to be doing when I get home? Like, it was a total shift.
And so your body wasn't actually wanting to go to sleep.
Oh, weird.
Well, I mean, we know that because you said you tried.
Yeah, but weird when you connect it.
And this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about when we start talking about energy or tiredness or whatever, that like all this stuff gets conflated. And we use this language all kinds of ways, and it takes just one or two statements to be like, oh, and it's like incontrovertible because I'm not telling you some theory about what's
Right.
happening. I'm just telling you back what you just told me.
Right.
Like obviously your body was not having the impulse to fall asleep, because if your body had that impulse and your mind was wanting to fall asleep, then you fall asleep. We can keep ourselves awake when the body wants to fall asleep and we override it with the mind. And we can try and make ourselves fall asleep even though the body doesn't have that impulse. We can't make ourselves fall asleep cognitively, but we can set up a situation in which we are likely to fall asleep. But that requires that we not actually be trying to fall asleep. So that's tricky. It's
Mhm.
hard for people to set up a situation where I'm likely to fall asleep, but not be actively trying to consciously make myself fall asleep. Yeah, you were just transitioning back from vacation. Most likely you had been very physical. I mean, you just said you're tired from walking around more than you usually do. I'm going to guess you probably like slept in and rested a lot in that way, but you also probably were up a lot later than you usually are. And so you were tracking to some extent how much sleep you had gotten and been like, oh, I did not get a lot of sleep. I should try and like rest up. Also, there was a point in the drive where there wasn't conversation happening, and maybe even that your partner was wanting to like listen to something that you weren't really particularly interested
100%.
in.
His
So-
own podcast.
So it's like, well, this isn't a good time for talking, and we've had a big weekend. And then your thoughts start turning to stuff that isn't enjoyable to think about, and you can't do a whole lot about it, right? Like thinking about the stuff you need to do at a time when you can't do it. So you're like, you know what? I think what would be better, kind of reverse engineering, right? Here's all this stuff I need to do as soon as we get back. Can't do anything about it now, but what could I do right now that makes it so that'll go better? I could get some sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So you identified it as the thing that you should do.
Yeah.
What?
I was like, that'll be $200.
That does nothing, right? That's what a lot of people, including a lot of therapists, think is the value of therapy, is to just give people insight. This is what your experience was.
Right.
And it can be useful because it allows you to kind of connect some dots and pay attention to some things. But no, I'm focused in on like, okay, cool, fine, whatever. But what was the point? What was the question? What was the thing you wanted help with? This is why we always got to come back to
Well, I hate that part.
people generally do. Yeah.
Because then I don't know.
Yeah.
And then what?
Then the work is to figure it out.
To figure out why it was brought up in the first place.
No, to figure out what it is that that's why I phrase things so specifically, right? What is it that is happening or that happened that you want to happen differently?
Yeah.
Because there's a million different things. I could jump to the conclusion of like, oh, you want to learn how to fall asleep when you decide it's time to fall asleep.
Mhm.
That's one thing people might want to work. Or you might want to explore like, what could I have done with that time instead that might have been useful since I couldn't get myself to sleep? Or I have a particular theory or at least a question or concern about why I was exhausted while sitting down, but then got energized after standing up.
I guess I'm like, it's not really a big deal.
It's
And yeah, I guess I could talk about things that I could have done instead of thinking about these things. But I'm not upset about what happened.
This all makes sense and is correlated to the problem you were just pointing out,
Which is
not
what?
knowing what you want.
Uh-huh.
And it's very important. We talk about it all the time. It's very important to help people understand the ideal is that nothing in your life is a big deal.
Yeah.
And that nothing makes you upset. And even if that is ever the case, that there's nothing that's a big deal and nothing that's really upsetting you, you will still want some things to be different.
Yeah.
And it has to be understood that wanting something to be different is completely separate from whether or not it's a big deal, whether or not it's really painful or distressing or difficult to experience it the way that it is. Because as long as
Brandon, I don't want that to be different. Like, that was fine.
then why are you talking about it?
Because we were talking about tiredness, and so I was thinking about a time. I hate you. I feel like you've got this face.
Well, yes, one of the things that I try and train therapists on, but also just helpful to say to everybody, is to remember that everything has a cost, including something that gets lost a lot, thought and communication both have costs. And we only pay costs when there's a value. You didn't have to say any of that. You could have said any other thing or nothing.
Maybe
at all.
I was hoping you would just like find the thing of why I brought it up. So I,
Fine, but that's still something you would want to be different then. You would want to know why this stuck in your memory. You would want to understand it. And if you knew or if you understood, then what?
I don't know. I guess it would. I don't know. I don't know. I'm thinking about how interesting it was to me that I was able to tune out so much of the podcast that was playing, or sometimes the audiobook that was playing, and then my boyfriend would say something about like, oh, that's really interesting, and then he'd pause and talk about it, and I just was not hearing any of the words that were said, and that happened many a time. And I don't know, maybe that's what it is, of just.
See, now this is why as a therapist it is useful to be able to like remember things, to draw connections between things.
Okay.
Not required, because nobody can remember everything, but being able to remember. Because you have mentioned in the past a story where it was reversed, I believe, although I could be misremembering, where you were making noise and your boyfriend was doing something.
Oh no, it's when he was making noise and I was watching TV and I was able to tune out the noise.
Oh, right. It was, he brought it up because he was worried that the noise he was making would be disruptive to you.
And it wasn't.
But so now, two different instances separated by some measure of
The
time,
same thing.
where it's like, okay, he's doing something that's interesting to him and makes noise. I'm not interested in it, and it just doesn't bother me. I'm able to filter it out.
But it spooks me, Brandon. It like, I don't know. Like, and why am I getting so emotional about it now? Like,
Why did you just say, oh?
like because I, like, it is some connection to like not, like, being able to comprehend or follow or like be a part of something. I don't know.
It's an overfocus on cognition.
Yeah, it's such an overfocus on cognition.
This idea that I have to consciously, like, here's something that sometimes I think about it and it makes me sad. Even to this day, it's better than it used to be, but still sometimes. It's like, I don't remember most stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that is true, of course, again, literally, must be, definitely is. There is no exception to this. That is true for every person.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of stuff we don't remember. And we can talk about what exactly do you mean by remember. There's a difference between remembering what it felt like versus remembering that it happened as like a factual tidbit or what. But yeah, no, we just don't remember stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I freak out about it a little bit.
Yeah.
Especially when thinking about my kids and stuff. Like, oh man, I just like don't remember what it was like when they were a baby. Or,
Yeah.
you know, I have images and certain specific memories, but if you really examine it, this is one of those things that can get kind of existentially horrifying. Maybe not for everybody, but if you really examine it, like how much in a given like year of life do I really remember?
Yeah.
And that really only matters, like that only freaks you out if you think, like I still do to some extent, that the point of all this is about what you think and know and remember and notice, as though an experience or something is irrelevant or it's lost. It was a waste because I don't remember it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how it is.
You said that's how it is?
That's not how it is.
No.
Things happen and things matter whether you notice them or understand them or not.
Mm-hmm.
For all of us, some of the things that we've done that are most impactful to other people, both in ways that we would want and in ways that we don't want, have been stuff that we didn't even know we did, don't even remember, but they do. And same for, some of the things that other people have done that have impacted me the strongest, both in terms of ways that I like and in terms of ways that I don't like, stuff they don't even know. that they did or don't remember or didn't notice at the time. Yeah, you are afraid, as pretty much all. You just ran through a quick list of like what group noun do I want to select? All people in our culture, all neurodivergent people, all intelligent people, all people who are interested in this kind of stuff. But it's all of that, really. I mean, we have a focus on intellect that you're supposed to understand and know everything. To the extent that one thing that often happens with stuff like this is that people are always tired and just don't know it. And so what'll happen then is like when the certain context emerges in which someone all of a sudden now becomes aware of a tiredness that they have been, that signal has been there all along. They're like, what just happened? How did I just get so tired? As though like
It hasn't been there.
Right. This has to do with the CPAP machine too. Well, I should say.
Does it?
The way in which that relates to the CPAP machine goes into like Brandon theory stuff, which I'm happy to share, but it's not like a known thing.
And what's your Brandon theory?
I think that the extent to which we, like culturally, collectively, but we as individuals attempt to intellectually control our sleeping habits is massive.
Mm-hmm.
Deciding intellectually when is the best time to go to sleep and when is the best time to wake up and whatever.
And they tell you to wear your CPAP when you're napping. I'm like, I'm not going to know when I'm napping. I'm just going to nap. I'm not going to go and get this machine and put it on me.
Yeah. I want to say that makes sense to me, right? Like I also am a person who like got to be up by X time because this thing's going to happen and whatever. And if we want to be pedantic about like, would you really need to? Like, no, of course I need to in order to whatever. Or I need to, or else whatever. I need to be up by X time, or else I won't be able to get my son to his orchestra recital or practice, rehearsal, whatever, on time. So of course, just like that, I like that we use indoor plumbing and have trained ourselves to like only use the bathroom when in the proper place. Like I think that's a great thing that we do. It's also useful to remember that's not how this was all designed. We're running new software on old hardware. Like there's going to be glitches and stuff, right? So same thing with the sleep. And in particular, here's some stuff that is like relatively established in the research literature and whatever, is that there is such a thing as night owls, early birds.
Mm-hmm.
Like biologically speaking, there is evidence to suggest that some people do better in various ways with going to bed late and sleeping late, and other people do better with going to bed earlier and waking earlier. How much of that is like genetic or inborn versus learned, and how much can it change or whatever, all up for debate. But here's an interesting correlation, anecdotal correlation that I have noticed is the people that I know of, clients and friends and colleagues and whatever, that have sleep apnea diagnoses and use CPAP machines overwhelmingly tend to be people that if there was no such thing as schedule, like you could do whatever you want, whenever you wanted, would go to bed late and wake up late.
Mm-hmm.
And our culture is generally focused on going to bed earlier and waking earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And so people like that have been in a battle to some extent for some portion of their lives of making myself sleep differently than what my body's natural impulses are. One theoretical, like potential, because this is again getting into just like theory stuff,
Mm-hmm.
observations and wonderings. One potential impact of that would be that if people do get good at setting up the context in such a way where I fall asleep at a time that is not like what my body's optimal impulse is that maybe the sleep that I'm experiencing isn't as restful as it would be if I followed my body's natural impulses. If that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like maybe I would wake up a lot more in the night, including small little wake ups. And I know that sleep apnea specifically is about like obstruction of the airway and body like blood oxygen level falling. And it is also known that like in some extreme cases of sleep apnea, it can even like be dangerous. But those cases are very rare to my knowledge.
Mhm.
But kind of the same way that like if you are not dyslexic and you don't like know well someone who is dyslexic, the general cultural thought about what dyslexia is that like the words or the letters shift around on the page, which is not what people's actual experience is, but it's just it was a useful narrative way to explain what's going on, even though it's not actually accurate.
It's a way to communicate it cinematically too, I think.
Yeah, it very much fits the deficit model, meaning like if I am someone who realizes that that person just read that word with the letters out of
Mhm.
order,
Mm-hmm.
which by the way is much more likely to be the case than if for me to notice somebody else reading a word differently than what the word like what's a example I can use here? All right, like if the word is automobile
Mm-hmm.
and somebody's like reading, someone who's dyslexic is reading through it relatively quickly and reads it as automotive.
Mm-hmm.
I, as a listener, am much less likely to like track that was some kind of, they didn't read the word that was actually there than if they are to say something like automotive.
Mm-hmm.
Because that I'm like, wait, what? So then I, as an outside observer, am much more likely to notice instances where letters have been reversed than where like a different
Sure,
word has
sure.
been assigned to some of those letters. That
Mhm.
makes sense to me. And if I then am like, well, why did that happen? I mean, it can't be that they don't know what like phonetically is represented by the letters because they're saying that stuff all the time. It's not that they don't know how to read. They know how to read. They read stuff all the time. The easiest explanation is like, they just saw those letters out of order. And in a sense, that's true, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
meaning in that like at the end of the processes of perception, they ended up with, this is my idea of what the word is that I just read. But that's not about the actual vision part.
I'm thinking about the way I see letters right now.
All right, here's a different example. If somebody says something like, this is a fairly common thing, right? Like I was falling asleep and I saw a face on the ceiling, right? We all would generally assume that person didn't literally see a face on the ceiling, but that there were something they saw, shadows, whatever, that got perceived by their mind as a face for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Even the person themselves is saying that. So there's an implied and assumed distinction between like the visual sensory data coming into my eyes versus the way my mind kind of constructed the thing together. With dyslexia, because we don't talk about stuff like that, say people will say like, I can see it in my mind. No, you literally cannot see it. You're not getting visual data. You have a concept that matches to some experience of getting visual data. This is all like nuanced and it's not necessary for people to generally understand or talk about it in this way. So it all just gets said the same way and it ended up getting thought of as like, so they're literally seeing things differently. And if you ask people, nobody would say like, I think they're visually hallucinating. Like if they really delve down on it, they know that what they mean is like something in the like concept just got jumbled up a little bit.
Oh man. I'm thinking about when I read signs like on the road or just anywhere. And how I'll just see words that I'm more familiar with, and it's not even close to it. It'll have like 3 of the same letters of a word that I usually read or think about.
See, that's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, that's how it's supposed to work.
We call this Gestalt perception,
Mm-hmm.
meaning your mind or the processes that like build stuff going into your mind. So let's say your brain, your nervous system, whatever. It does work to fill in the gaps.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you close one eye, everybody in each eye you have a blind spot because there's a point at the back of the eye where the optic nerve connects, and there are no rods or cones in that spot.
Mhm.
So there literally cannot be any visual data coming in from that spot. But we don't see like a little black, lack of data floating
Right.
around because we just fill in the gaps and we just extend the patterns. This is when people do like visual illusions and stuff like that. We're playing around with some of these things where the mind has algorithms.
Or
and
like
stuff.
I don't even know if this is true, but the text that they have on a lot of like Facebook things, like it's jumbled, but the first letter and the last letter are the same, and the other letters in the middle are not part of the word. And it's like, you are one of the 20% of people who can read this kind of text. If you can do this, you are amazing.
And if that was actually true, that only 20% of people could read that, then those things wouldn't get spread around a lot.
Right.
Because
Right.
anybody who couldn't read it
Would be
would
like,
theoretically think that it's gibberish, and I'm not going to share random letter gibberish. Like,
right.
no, why would I share something that is just random letters on it? Obviously, I have read it if I'm
Right.
going to share it.
Right. That's funny.
It's a good particular. It's the same thing as a chain letter, like the old chain letter
Mhm.
scam stuff. It's a good scam is to be like, almost nobody gets this, but you
You
get it, and
do.
you're special, because that will then people intrinsically want to share this. Like, ooh, look at this cool thing that I can do.
I'm thinking about another visual intake. So we did a lot of antiquing this weekend and a lot of thrift shops. And my boyfriend likes to find a lot of like really bizarre VHS tapes that are to put in some of his like chaos packs that he does for his art. Long story. But so I was trying to help him find just like really avant-garde, weird movies, and I was just having a very hard time recognizing what that means, what that looks like. Where he just was like, you just got to find the one that looks the most like gritty or like and it was really hard for me. I think by the end of the trip, I finally got it, but my brain, cognition, Brandon, was just having a hard time. I like gave up and would just like walk around the rest of the store. 'Cause you can go in this. This is so overstimulating.
All right, by avant-garde,
Uh-huh.
you just meant like random seeming,
Right. Funnies. Yeah.
right? Which is not technically what avant-garde is.
I don't even think he said avant-garde. That's just the word I used.
But to whatever language he used to communicate the idea of what I'm looking for is the kind of thing that defies categorization.
Yeah.
By definition is a very difficult thing because
It's
like
impossible.
what category this fits into the category of being categorized as not being able to be categorized.
Right.
Like it's an oxymoron. It's
Oh, that's helpful to
paradox.
hear,
It can't
Brandon.
be done. And what he really just meant was like, I know it when I see it. It kind of just tickles my fancy in a certain kind of a way, right? But anything you pick and give to him, he might be like, yeah, perfect. Or he might be like, no, that's a little too on the nose or whatever.
It was quite.
And if we reverse the roles, it would be the same, right? Anything you pick
For
would
sure.
be like, this is perfect. Anything he picked might be like, yeah, that's great. Might be like, nah, that's a
Right.
little like, look at me, how different am I?
Right.
It's too much, whatever. Not random enough.
Right.
So some of it is just that.
Yeah.
And it's actually just then it's like cost value benefit.
It totally was
analysis.
cost value.
It's not really worth you trying to
wasn't.
do this if it's what he's saying is like, I need something that I'll know it when I see it.
Right.
So like then just look. What am I supposed to do about it?
Right.
I can show you things that I think are cool, but if that doesn't correlate to what like
Right.
why am I here?
Yeah.
And then you just did your own thing.
Yeah.
Which is cool. Presumably he was also cool with that.
Yeah. That's so helpful to think about it as something that's like not categorizable. Is that the word? Non-categorized.
Yeah.
It feels very
Can't
long
be.
of a word.
Uncategorizable. Cannot be categorized. Defies categorization. Look, those visual illusions where it's like, it's a duck, it's a rabbit, whatever, and you can swap back and forth. Or like the dress that everybody was so obsessed with for a while.
Love that one.
Because that one was brilliant. Not that I think anyone like deliberately framed it this way,
Uh-huh.
but it was brilliant because it was framed as an argument, as opposed to the illusions that are constructed like, is it a duck or is it a rabbit? Well, it's either one. It's deliberately intended to be that. But that's a dress.
Is it
that dress really exists. It really is one of these two sets of colors, and so now everybody's trying to figure out what it is so that they can be right. The best
Wait,
way
did
to
yours-
scam anybody is to create something where there's a way to be right and others are wrong.
That's funny.
And then everyone will do anything to be on the right side of it.
What colors did you see, Brian?
I saw it as white and gold. It was very difficult for me to see it as the black and blue, but I got it like a couple times, especially if I like put my hands around certain like.
Isn't it funny that we're like,
colors.
but maybe like,
Yes.
it's so funny.
And this is the point is, or the thing that's like two faces or a
Yeah.
vase.
I
or
loved
whatever.
optical illusion books. Oh, I had so many of those growing up.
What we're saying here is, in terms of visual data coming in, nothing's happening. This is part of why we find these things interesting. Like, what I'm seeing is not changing in terms of visual data hitting my
Mhm.
eyes, but perceptually, something is flipping, and the experience of seeing this thing becomes two different things. It's this, then it's this.
Mhm, mhm.
And I know when it's which one. And that's weird. And so these things are fun and popular to some extent because we don't generally recognize that there's this extra step of like how we perceive. But to know it, to know in a cathartic meaning and non-important, irrelevant, like this is not going to impact your life one way or the other
Mhm.
kind of a way, is like, that's so fascinating. You know, it's like tickling my brain to just see it this way, then see it this way, then see it. Wow.
I always get a little sad when it like breaks, and I'm like, oh, I see how this works, and then it goes like I get sad during. I'm thinking specifically of like the clown house kind of wheels with the ramp that you go down and the thing is spinning with the lights. Do you know what I'm talking
I
about?
don't.
Like a tunnel that you're walking in,
Yeah.
and it feels like you're like tilting, but you're not.
Oh,
It's just the lights and the way the thing around is moving.
sure.
But then when I just discover that I know I'm just walking on flat ground, I'm like, aw, the illusion's broken.
Yeah. And it does break.
Yeah.
And then it comes back after you've been away
It's
for a
so
minute.
weird. I went to the Museum of Illusions a couple years ago. Kind of underwhelming, if you ask me.
Yeah.
But
Not things generally seem to be underwhelming to you though.
yeah, why? That makes me sad
Why?
because I think about how so many other people get so much joy from these things, or so it seems.
Did you not have joy?
I did, but I also was like critiquing a lot. And
Did that mean that you weren't experiencing joy?
no, but I sometimes wonder like,
Don't you enjoy critiquing stuff?
yeah, I do. I love critiquing stuff.
So that enhanced your experience of joy.
Yeah, I love to be a hater, Brian.
Now, see that you don't, and that's where you start to lose the joy.
Yeah.
You judge yourself for critiquing as though
It's a
that
bad
makes
thing.
you're not participating in it in the way that you're supposed to. But you don't know how much other people are doing that, first of all.
Yeah.
Second of all, who cares? If that's what you enjoy, like there's nothing intrinsically wrong with being like, I think there's a limitation here or whatever.
Yeah.
You were literally just starting to cut you off, but you were starting to like share something about it. It's useful to you, you know, like you wanted to talk about it. And then you're feeling bad as though you didn't engage with it correctly.
I always feel that way. I always feel like I am not engaging with things the correct way.
Well, as I'm talking about all the time, right? If I'm a golfer and every time I hit the ball, it lands exactly 20 feet to the left of where I want it to go, I can focus on, I got to get it so that it lands exactly where I'm trying to get it to go, like right where I'm aiming.
Mhm.
Or if the mistake is consistent, the reason we default to that is because if your mistakes are all over the place, sometimes it's here, there, whatever, then yes, the only real viable solution is to try and make it so that I'm getting it where I want it to be. But if every time it's the same mistake,
Mhm.
then all I have to do, it's just so much easier, is just start aiming 20
Different.
feet to the right of where I actually want the ball to land. So if you're saying that you always think that you are not engaging with things correctly, you can do all this work to be like, no, I should think that I am engaging with things correct. Or you can just say to yourself, well, okay, I always think that. So on my scale of like -10 is I'm doing this the worst way it could be done, and +10 is like absolutely the perfect way it should be done.
Mhm.
Wherever I think I am, I probably really am like 7 points to the right of that. This goes for like, I always think people hate me more than they really do. So then instead of trying to change that, just be like, if I think someone thinks of me as like a -6, they probably think of me as like a 4.
Mhm.
And you just start like working on doing that second step, adjusting that. You don't have to change the thought, just know how it's useful.
Yeah. I always think that things should feel, or I should think things are more significant than they are.
If you always think that things should feel more significant than they are,
Mm-hmm.
then just make an adjustment of like, well, I guess my barometer of like how significant something should feel is off, so things are probably more significant than I think they are.
Yeah, and then that'll eventually just change the way I think.
No.
It's fine.
Why would it need to? If you make the adjustment, like
That's true. Okay.
if I always
Okay.
go 20 feet to the left and now I start aiming 20 feet to the right, so it goes exactly where, why would I want to mess with how far to the left it goes?
Yeah.
That would mess up my whole thing.
So I guess it's fine.
It can be if you see it the right way.
Yeah.
And that's what's so fun about our work. It's the duck, the rabbit thing. Like we can take the exact same experience, the exact same data, and just frame it differently.
Mhm.
And now I am having a different experience. That's not what we're always
So
going to do.
I think about like hanging out with my friend and how I was having a perfectly fine time. Wasn't anything bad about it. Wasn't anything that I was like wahoo about. But I stayed a while hanging out with my friend. But then afterwards I was like, meh. Like, I don't know. I underwhelmed, Brandon. Like I'm supposed to be feeling very.
It's interesting to know that you connect the concept of being underwhelmed to what this is really about.
What is this really about?
Opportunity costs. I talked to you about that before.
Maybe.
Opportunity costs refers to like, so if I buy a candy bar for $1, what we're all going to say is, what did that candy bar cost? It cost $1.
Oh,
Which,
yeah.
sure, but that's not a very relevant metric for me as a person, right? Like that's good to know in the abstract, but what does it actually cost me? What am I actually sacrificing? I'm giving up the opportunity to use that dollar in some other way.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it's not that it costs me $1, it's that it costs me the opportunity to spend that dollar some other way. So you hanging out with your friend
Mhm.
for an hour, I don't know what it actually was, but you hanging out with a friend for an hour, people tend to generally think of that as like, I spent an hour with them. But you're responding to the opportunity cost. I could have been spending that hour. I gave up the opportunity to spend that time and energy on other things. And as soon as you do that, you start to think about like, well, I could have been doing this and I could have been doing that. I should have done my laundry.
Yeah, there are very few people where I don't have that thought. And
Very few things generally. That's what this whole underwhelming thing,
that I should be doing something else with my time, or I
or
want to.
could at
Could be.
least.
Yeah, it's always.
Because it's not, I'm not trying to make it sound like you're making crap up or whatever.
No.
You could always theoretically, like as a therapist, I'm really helping this person. Whoever, I'm giving a hypothetical. I'm working with this client. They're really benefiting from this work. If I think about like, well, who else could I be helping with that time and energy?
Sure.
I'm always going to be able to come up with other people that like are in greater distress, or
Yeah.
that I could help even more efficiently than this person or whatever.
Yeah.
It's this comparison thing.
Yeah.
And it loses track of the experience. I don't think I actually sent the message. Did I say that bird in the hand is worth two in the bush message? I don't think I finished
I don't
writing
know.
it. You know that phrase, bird in the hand is worth two in the bush?
Never heard that in my life.
Really?
Never.
It's such a common like idiom. I mean, I think idioms generally are less and less common as time goes on. There's only so much space for things like that, and memes take up.
Okay, so what is it?
A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, meaning I have a bird right here, like in the sense of hunting for meat or whatever, right? I have this one, and there's two more out there that I don't have yet.
Mm.
And so one would think in the abstract, well, two is better than one, but the one I have and the two are just theoretical that I could maybe get.
Yeah.
So the idea,
I'm always living that.
yeah, the fact that something is real impacts how valuable it is.
This is a disaster.
Well, this is again our culture, over focus on cognition, intellect, So we deal with things in the abstract so much, right? Like here's the thing.
That's
You there's something you really want, like a article of clothing you really want, and it goes on sale for like half off. And you're like, hey, I was like close to paying full price. I'm jumping on this. This is great, and I feel great about it. And then the next day, it's now available for half of that. Now you feel bad, even though you got what you wanted. You were happy to pay.
right.
You were happy about it. Just now, the idea that there was an abstract, theoretical way that it could have been better.
Yeah,
You feel worse.
that's why I liked vacation, because I didn't have my home and all the things that I think about. So it was like, and now I'm going to this monster truck thing. What else am I gonna do? I don't know.
Well, you could have still. This is one of the things that I think vacation does for people in our culture, like the way that we think about vacation, is that it's a time where you are supposed to just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Right. There are some vacations where it's like you're supposed to see the sights or whatever, but some versions of vacation are just follow your whims, do whatever. So where if right now someone was like, hey, you want to see the monster trucks? You'd be like, no, I should probably work on my notes, or I should do this, or I should do that, or whatever. And so you don't go. Where they're on vacation, if you started to think, and you might have, maybe I should work on my note, you'd be like, no, it's vacation, I should go. So the opportunity, like what you think of as the appropriate thing to do has shifted. You could have done any of the stuff that you do at Annie, but a lot of the stuff you do at home. And so one of the worst versions of this, and this all makes sense, is that, as always, we're talking about some of the unfortunate implications or downsides of things that are useful and valuable. So people use them for reasons and then don't catch how they extend out into some problems also. Is hypothetical other versions of you in your life.
It's a nightmare.
Yes, people are constantly comparing, like, well, sure, I enjoyed hanging out with my friend, but would I have enjoyed hanging out with that friend even more if I had gotten this thing done beforehand? Or would I have enjoyed hanging out with a different friend even more than that?
We'll never know.
Or, yeah, because that's not real. This is part of why I work so hard with people on the, like, you're wrong about everything. Because that's just your thought. You think that maybe you would have had a better time doing this other thing, or maybe it would have been more productive to do this other thing. That's not real. You don't get to do this multiple times to test the two different options against each other. It's not real. And I can point out all kinds of logic. We can go down that path of like, well, if you had done that, you likely would have been thinking about how maybe hanging out with your friend would have been better than.
I blame if you give a mouse a cookie.
Yeah, I'm intrigued.
It's the first thing I thought of. Like,
I know the book, but why?
If this happens, then this is going to happen. And if you give him a mouse, then he's going to look in the mirror and he's going to see his hair needs a haircut. And then he's going to ask for the clippers. And
so this is like when I was saying there's valuable stuff. This is the whole point of cognition. We have it for a reason. We use it for a reason to think about what might happen.
Seems pretty annoying.
It's really wonderful if you use it for what it's for, which we all do. And some of us do that, much more frequently and successfully than others.
What is it for?
For just running scenarios to get, I was briefly considered talking about Bayesian statistics versus frequentist statistics.
Don't.
That is useful sometimes, but
Thank you for not.
it's the holodeck, right? It's you, based on all the information I have, I'm running a scenario of like, if I were to X, what do I think would happen? And that's really useful because, if I were to try and jump across this gap, what do I think? I think I would probably fall, so I'm not going to do that. That just saved my life, the ability to think about that, or at least potentially, hypothetically, right? Just kind of the whole funny point is all of this is hypothetical.
Brandon, also, let's end this at 2:30 so I can get supervision before my session at 4.
We'll wrap up sooner than that.
Great.
Then,
Thanks.
Yes, it is for doing our best, given the information we have, to make our predictions about what would happen or what will happen or what might happen. That's wonderful.
Until it's not.
That's always wonderful.
Okay.
When it gets bad is when we start to mistake the idea that like this is actual real stuff. Like I can only make predictions based on the things I already know. If I know that I don't know stuff, which everybody does, two options there. One is to be terrified. Be like, well, then what's the point of even trying to make a prediction? I don't even know if that's going to be right. Like maybe I'll die if I try this thing, right? The other is to just bake that in. Like this is my best idea of what would happen, and I have to be aware of the fact that I don't have all the information. So if I'm trying to decide whether or not to jump over something, will I make it or will I fall and die, whatever. I don't need to have perfect knowledge of like, well, I have always been correct about when I thought I could make a jump, I've made it. If I can instead say like, well, I think I can make it, but I might be wrong. And then there's this other part of the calculation that comes in of like, how important is it to try? Like, let me balance this against the risk of what might happen. I think I'll make it, but is it worth taking that risk? So people get stuck in this loop because if I think I'll make it, but then I don't do it anyway, well, now I'm being scared. I'm a coward, right? Like, I know it'll be fine, but I'm just nervous, and so I'm not doing it. And I know that's silly because I know it'll go well. Like, no, that is part of how this should work. You don't know it will go well. Based on what you know right now, you believe the chances are high that it will go well, but you also know that there's stuff you don't know. And even with the stuff you know, you could be doing something inaccurately in your mind. So it is then worth saying, is it worth taking a shot at it? Not just, I should because I know it will go well. You don't know that. But we think that people know this stuff. We think that other people know, and we think we're supposed to know. We don't know, and we know that, but we think we're supposed to. There's a reason that if you pay attention in my language, I will generally say things like, I am confident that blank blank, or I think it is very likely that blank blank, rather than I know it'll be whatever. Because odds and stakes, or cost and value, like all these things, I'm trying to bring this stuff back in to remind people that your thought is one piece of how this all goes. And then there's this other stuff too that matters. And everybody's like, well, in my mind it'll go well, so I have to do it. And if not, I'm crazy. What's wrong with me? Instead of like, why err on the side of caution? Is it really important to do that? And that plays into this whole cycle where then everyone has to make it so that if I want something to be different than it is, but the way that it is fine or better, then what's wrong with me? I had a fine time with my friend. What's wrong with me for thinking about what other thing might have been better? Why do I critique things? Why am I always criticizing yourself for wondering? Like, who cares if you wonder? You still had the experience you had. Did you wondering whether or not something else might be more beneficial for you? Did that detract from the experience? So does it really matter? But it really matters if people think that what's in your mind is the thing that matters more than anything, because that also correlates then to like, well, if I feel sad or scared or any of these unpleasant emotions, that's bad. Just like feeling pain is bad. It's unpleasant. It is not bad in some broad way. It's important that you feel those things. There's not something wrong with you for feeling those things, which isn't to say that it's always perfect and there's never like disproportionate feelings or, but the assumption should be that absent other evidence, absent any evidence to the contrary, that you're feeling the way that is the most optimal to feel in response to the things that are happening. How much could get hurt to get thrown off a bull? My past predictions have not been great. Much better now. Yes, my dad has done bull riding a good amount, especially later on in his life. After the age of 60 is probably the bulk of it.
Bull riding after the age of 60?
Yeah.
Wow.
He's a very interesting guy.
I believe it.
They're just thoughts.
They're just thoughts.
They're useful in exactly the way that they are useful. They are not reality. If I think something will go this way, and then in reality it goes this way, then my thoughts were wrong.
Yeah.
Not like something happened that's wrong. Something bad is going on here.
Yeah.
Your thoughts were inaccurate. Reality is the one that's real. The thoughts are meant to help us in navigating reality, not to dictate what reality is.
Mm-hmm.
So back to the idea then is for us to all be dealing with stuff that's not a big deal. It's not silly to be sad about something that you're like, I know in the scheme of things it's not a big deal, or I shouldn't care about it. Or no, that's the goal, the aim for everybody is to get to a point where it's like the things I'm thinking about, how they could be different, are things that even if they don't change, are fine.
Mm-hmm.
But if I think that my thoughts are supposed to be accurate predictors of reality, therefore I would think that thinking about wanting something to be different would only be reasonable to do if reality was bad or problematic in some way. So now my options are either this stuff is bad, or I'm bad for thinking about wanting it to be different. I'm crazy, or I'm selfish, or greedy, or vain, or we have lots of different words for I want something to be different, even though the way that it is not a problem. I mean, I just listed a bunch.
Yes, you did.
Greedy, vain,
Yes, you
whatever, but lazy is another one.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just how it is. The story you just told is, I had fun with my friend. End of story in terms of like what happened in reality.
Yeah.
But then you had some thoughts, which you did have, so it is real that you had those thoughts.
Right.
There's a different real, and I'm trying to clarify. When I say real, I mean it is composed of matter and energy. It exists in the observable universe. A thought is not real in that sense. It matters, it's valid, it's important, it's relevant. Your internal subjective experience, my subinternal, like that stuff matters. It does not require that something be real in order to matter. That's the connection to break, not to prove that our thoughts are real. But that's what happened, right? People are like, oh, who cares about your feelings? Who cares about what you think? Whatever, as though it's irrelevant. And we have to say, no, it matters. And the only way to justify that it matters, given the parameters of the conversation that were constructed, is it's real. And that makes sense, and it works for that thing in that context, but then it extends out into other stuff where like, I don't feel safe is the same thing as I am not safe. And it's not the same thing. That doesn't mean that feeling safe or unsafe is irrelevant or shouldn't be considered.
Mm-hmm.
But if you conflate those things, you're going to have a hard time. Because you're going to sometimes feel unsafe, but intellectually or logically determine or have the experience that you then learn, I was safe, am safe, whatever. And then you got to think, what's wrong with me that I'm thinking this thing that isn't accurate? The vast majority of the stuff that everybody thinks is inaccurate.
Yeah.
Everything's wrong in some way. Best example of this, and we'll wrap up, fear. The point of being afraid of something is so that you then are considering it, and anything that you could do to influence the outcome to make it so that you don't have the thing that you're afraid might happen, you're likely to do that. And if you had not been afraid, you might not have considered that. You might not have made those adjustments. So the more afraid you are of something, the less likely it is that that thing happens.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the point. I'm afraid that she'll get tired of me and leave me. Well, that your thing you're labeling with that is a lot of thoughts about what might keep her interested and happy and make our relationship strong, and lots of effort and intention towards doing those things. So we end up with people who have this pattern of like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm always so afraid that X will happen, and it never does.
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong with me? Now, the more afraid you are, the less likely it is to happen. That's how it's supposed to work. But we've got it twisted now to being like, I should only be afraid of something that happens all the time.
Sure.
That's
That's
what would
funny.
be the point of that?
Right.
Just fearing something that already we don't call that fear, we call it regret or pain or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is for something that hasn't happened yet. What else is a person supposed to think or experience? Same with, by the way, anxiety, which is a whole thing because we've conflated it with a lot of like physical things as well. If someone says I have anxiety, you do not know if they mean like some physical feeling or thoughts of a certain nature or just an experience of those thoughts in a certain way. August mixed together. Anyway, we got to wrap up. We didn't do anything about the CPAP machine.
That's okay.
I'll say this. I think
Forgot about that.
track the, like we were saying before, identify what is it that I'm hoping will be different.
Mhm.
And if it's that I'll be less tired, more
What does that look
energized,
like?
great. Track your neutral benchmark, like this is what is happening right now and put something observable on it. Then use the CPAP machine and track it and see how different it is. And if it is a big enough difference, you will very clearly, you won't have to get yourself to be like, oh, I got to do this thing. You'll have to do that at first to get the tracking.
Mhm.
But once you track it, if it's like, oh my gosh, this is a huge difference, it will be very easy for you to continue to do all the annoying stuff, because now you'll be thinking about that as a cost, not a chore or an obligation. This is I can either do this or I can do that. And if it's worth it, then it's worth it. I do have a theory that for many people who get CPAP machines, not that they are not helpful, but that the value is not great enough to be worth the cost, right? Like, it might help me, but it doesn't really change that much. And part of that is because a lot of people think of sleep apnea as like the dangerous version. And so it's healthy for me to wear the CPAP machine, even if it doesn't help me. Like, the whole reason I found out about sleep apnea is because I'm not sleeping well and I'm tired the next day. And then using the CPAP machine results in me being even more tired the next day. Then why am I using it? But people think of it because I got it from a doctor. It's like something I have to do. But it's not, obviously, or you would be doing it every day.
Mhm.
So evaluate to what extent is it worth it or not. Track that stuff. Other theories we'll talk about another time.
Okay.
Good to see you all. Be
Thanks.
well, everybody. Goodbye. We'll be back next week. Oh, wait, no, we won't. Because it's a holiday.
It is a holiday next week.
We will not be doing the stream next week. I'll message that.
Great.
Or you will. You do the social media stuff now.
Yeah, I
you can
can
put it
listen.
out there that we're not doing the stream next week. So we'll be back in 2 weeks. Goodbye.